right, well, Avengers Endgame is upon us, folks, and I was on, YouTube pretty much, just watching videos, and this playlist popped up as a recommended video, one marvelous scene, and I've watched at least over half a dozen, and I figured, well, I saw some channels with over 1 million subscribers, some with a few 100,000, but then I got to the videos where subscribers only had maybe a couple thousand or less, and I believe that the more I watched the videos, the more I actually paid attention. And I do believe this is like an open invite to any YouTuber to do a video with the title or hashtag one marvelous scene for submission, and hopefully this video makes the cut. But for this particular video, what I wanted to do on a channel that's all about Tyler Perry shows, believe it or not, where I review things, I did decide to, mix it up a little with this. So this video, I don't know if this is my favorite Marvel scene, but when I looked more into what makes the one marvelous scene playlist, I figured if somebody mentioned to me the MCU, what would be the first scene I thought about, or which one would come to mind first? It would have to be this one.
I am Iron Man. You think you're the only superhero in the world? Mr. Stark, you become part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet.
Who the hell are you?
Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
I mean, the end scene to end all end scenes, even though it was technically the first end scene. I mean, because of this one scene, I feel like anytime I go to a theater for any non-MCU related movie, I find myself sitting until the end of the credits. And I mean the literal end of the credits, because I can only imagine what it would have been like to be in theaters when Iron Man first came back in the late 2000s. At the time, I was still in high school, really wasn't big in the MCU. It really wasn't until my second year of college when I got into really the DC animated universe. For example, I grew up watching, Justice League, Static Shock, Batman Beyond, but it wasn't until I was older that I could really get into the storylines. For example, Justice League, the Cadmus arc. And then in 2012, so 2010 was when I got into the DC animated universe more. But then in 2012, I'll never forget, I started to revisit the animated Marvel movies. But then in 2014, my last semester of grad school, someone I knew in college sat me down and got me to watch the Avengers. So the first MCU movie I ever watched was the Avengers, which ironically enough was set in the end scene with Nick Fury going to see Tony Stark. And even a couple years before that, I was doing some voiceover work for one of my friends back in the communication field, and he asked me to be Nick Fury in the end scene for Captain America, the first Avenger. Basically, at the end when Cap wakes up, he's running through the city, and Nick Fury stops him. So honestly, I was in the MCU before I got into the MCU, if that makes any sense. But what makes this scene one marvelous scene was the fact that Iron Man was the one character, or Tony Stark was the one character I was drawn to when I saw the Avengers film back in 2014. And because of that, I just found a new level of sarcasm, for example, kind of being more of an asshole, I guess, but not Tony level where I couldn't stand people handing me things. And going back to the first Iron Man movie, the development of Tony from start to finish was something else, but there was just so much to take away from the end scene with Nick Fury, which I believe is, if you count the time where Nick Fury says, "I am Iron Man." You think you're the only superhero in the world? Mr. Stark, you became part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet. That entire scene is less than 30 seconds. And it just tells you so much about the MCU as a whole. You have to think of it this way. Iron Man was the first film. It was unknown how successful the movie would be. I'm sure they had predictions of what it would bring back from the box office, but depending on this movie being a success or this movie bombing, that would definitely influence the future of the MCU as we know it today. I mean, if the movie tanked, I doubt we would have an Endgame. in 2019. The Endgame probably would have been in 2009, if that. And I feel that when it comes down to it, Tony Stark throughout the movie was somewhat actively avoiding Agent Coulson, who was representing S.H.I.E.L.D. before it was actually called S.H.I.E.L.D. And, him and Pepper would kind of say, oh, okay, Pepper will set up a meeting for you to talk with me about my escape and yada, yada, yada. But to actually have Nick Fury himself, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., at Tony's house to, I wouldn't say confront him, but to encounter him about the Avenger Initiative face to face, let us knew right then. It's like, hey, you know what? We're really setting up for something big. Not Agent Coulson. This is me, Nick Fury. Let's talk about this face to face. And of course, they would have more encounters in Iron Man 2, the Avengers, of course, Age of Ultron, and the list goes on. But for this particular scene, Mr. Stark, you think you're the only superhero in the world. Again, Iron Man being the first film, Nick Fury's one statement talked about a world of superheroes that you didn't even know existed yet. Mr. Stark, you become part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it. So I love how the first sentence is about you think you're the only superhero in the world, but then he expands upon that by talking about you have become part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet. And that is so true. Guardians, Captain Marvel, Thanos, and the list goes on. It's just mind-blowing how a scene with only a handful of sentences helped shape the MCU as we know it. I have no words because Endgame is going to be the end of an era. I believe it's labeled the Infinity Saga. And to think that one end scene like this could just set the foundation of so many phenomenal movies ever since. Not to get emotional here, but this is definitely one for the record books in terms of what to expect. Now, I don't know what's to come in Endgame. I don't know how many, if any, end credit scenes we'll get, because this is truly the ending of a magnificent book. That doesn't mean that there aren't more wonderful end scenes or movies to come in the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But really, when you mention MCU to me, one of the first things that pops into my mind is obviously Nick Fury appearing in Tony Stark's house, pretty much reciting the iconic line Tony Stark said before the end credits roll, "I am Iron Man." And the rest is history. So with that being said, hopefully this video makes it to the playlist. If it does, thank you all so much. I believe Nando V Movies was the one to get this thing started. And I hope everybody enjoys the trip to Endgame. I mean, 3 hours is 3 hours, but we're talking about a saga that's lasted for almost, over a decade. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think of this magnificent MCU end credit scene? What are some of your favorite One Marvelous scenes? And if you're into Tyler Perry stuff, like his shows on like The Haves and the Have-Nots and If Loving You Is Wrong and other projects, be sure to hit the subscribe button because the MCU has lasted for over 10 years so far, and it's going to keep on going. I'm trying to get this channel to 100,000 subscribers so I can continue going as well. But Endgame is truly going to be the end of a magnificent part of my life that I never thought I would be interested in. The Avengers was the first film I got into, and maybe it's poetic justice that Endgame is the end of that journey. So once again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you later.